Our colleague Anusha Soni is also with us to provide us legal perspective on this entire story. Anusha, back in 2019, a two-judge bench had pronounced a split verdict on this case. Could you explain to us what that split verdict was? Split verdicts can, of course, be quite rare. And then can you also walk us through the timeline of this entire case over the last few years?
Well, if you look at the history of litigation between centre and the Delhi government ever since Arvind Kejriwal and the Aam Aadmi Party came to power, it has been a strong, or I must say an intense legal battle that has been fought at the High Court, at the Supreme Court, at various judicial forums. And it only points out to the kind of legal tussle, the kind of administrative tussle that we have seen between the centre and the strategic importance that Delhi has and the kind of functioning it has. Akash interestingly mentioned about 239 AA. I want to add just one bit to it. For the benefit of our viewers, this entire matter is about services. Now, what is services? Your Anti-Corruption Bureau is a service. How land matters are dealt with and who has the primacy over deciding which land needs to be allotted where, that's a service matter. More importantly, officers of bureaucracy that form the core for any government, they comprise services. Now, this is an entry under Schedule 7, List 2 and Entry 41 per se. If you talk about the list for the centre and the state as to how they have different powers. The core argument here is that what kind of power and sway does the Delhi government really have when it comes to deciding the posting and transfer of IAS, IPS, DANICs and various other officers who work for the Delhi government? Why does it become politically important? That's the second question we must ask. Is that any kind of sensitive policy matter, any kind of important decision that a government takes is executed by the officers at the end of the day? These are the officers who enjoy the trust and confidence of the politicians who are elected by the people. So Delhi government argues that if we don't have primarily any kind of control over the officers that we are working with, how is an executive really going to function? They cannot. And hence, under 239 AA that Akash was talking about, there is a certain degree of power that the Delhi government has. To sum up the argument that the central government made, the central government says that Delhi is a special zone, it's a special territory, and there's a special scheme that has been imparted to it. There's a primacy that the LG enjoys when it comes to matters pertaining to the national capital region or the national capital territory. Now, what is the intricate balance that the court is going to draw is going to be very important. And finally, one argument. I believe we should not see this judgment merely as something between the BJP versus AAP or Kejriwal versus the Modi-led government. This judgment is going to have far-reaching implications as to how our national capital territory is governed. For any government which is elected after Arvind Kejriwal, this judgment is going to apply. Whether the elected Delhi government has power to transfer the officers or not, over land matters or not, there are 4-5 issues that were carved out by the court. So I believe beyond the immediate politics, this particular judgment very crucial as to how our national capital is governed to it.
Could you just, Anusha, if we could double click on what you just said. You said that there are 4 to 5 areas that would actually be impacted by today's decision. Can you walk us through what they would be?
One, as I said, is pertaining to the transfer of officers. Secondly is about the land issue. The third is about how electricity, how the various discom operators are working here. Can they be audited by the CAG? You'd remember this was issue before the Delhi High Court. That can there be a CAG audit of discoms in the national capital region? So the kind of absence of synchronization or any kind of harmony that we have seen between the Delhi government and the centre, it was pretty much evident in the courts as well. That how the discoms will function, how is BSES functioning, land, electricity, transfer, posting. The Anti-Corruption Bureau was a much talked about one. On that, the split verdict, when it was given, I think there was a consensus that the Anti-Corruption Bureau largely is under the domain of the centre or the LG. So these were 4-5 issues which have to be decided by this judgment. We'd have to wait and see to what extent the court touches upon it. Is there a degree of finality that they are giving to it, considering it's a constitution bench? But 2 things to watch out for. 239 AA, the executive power, and what is the extent to which it is being interpreted in favor of the Delhi government or against the Delhi government. Secondly, transfer and posting. I think that's the bare bones of it. If our elected government has no power to transfer the officers or depute the officers, well, they are on crutches, literally, quite constitutionally and legally speaking. Is that the scenario that Supreme Court thinks was envisaged in the Constitution? So these 4-5 issues pertaining to land, administration of electricity boards, and also the transfer of officers. These are 3 issues, critical ones to watch out for. Okay. And if there is anything at all which is said about the ACB.
Anusha, now could you also walk us through what the 2019 split verdict was on this entire issue?
Well, it was a bench of Justice Suryakant and Justice Hima Kohli. These two judges had differed on all these issues that I just elucidated. They could not come up on any kind of unanimous agreement as to how these critical areas need to be navigated through. Now, the beauty and perhaps the problem of Indian Constitution in many ways is that a lot of things are not clearly demarcated. Like we have seen in the case of governor, it's an office which is so much talked about politically. It is a constitutionally revered position. Similar is the position of LG. When you come to the scheme of things, when it comes to the administration of the National Capital Territory. Now, LG has wide constitutional powers. This is for the benefit of the people of Delhi. This is also to keep in mind that the central government has a very important stake in making sure that the matters of Delhi are run in some kind of consultation with them. The absence of any kind of a written code that what happens in case of a conflict, who will have the final word, what are the powers, what are their demarcations, these were areas which were perhaps lacuna in law, and perhaps the constitution makers left it so that there can be some kind of coordination between the center and the state to the goodwill and the polity of the country. However, that has seemed to be impossible in the recent past, and that is something that was resonated very clearly in the judgment as well, because the court was not able to come to a conclusion as to how this should go forward. And that is why the court said two judges cannot answer this question. This question must be answered by a constitution bench. Filling that gap, filling that lacunae, that void, if I may call it, because there is no coordination between the two, is the scope of the judgment today, and it's going to be very critical and important to him.
Okay, Anusha, thank you.